Hi and welcome to the final part for now on my series of using Warcraft Logs. In this part we're just going to round up with some information on the Problems tab, as well as a couple of other bits and pieces and some information at the end on the author of Warcraft Logs in case you want to support them. So the Problems tab is up here. We've got our options, analyze, compare, rankings. Of course it doesn't need a guide to tell people how to find that. Replay, we've done all of these before apart from problems. So I'm going to click on this. Now there's various things we've got here. The first thing is it does tell you your raid's average item level. Here it says the minimum average item level required to beat this boss. And it always looks very precise. I think, how did they come up with that? It's simply to do with who has logged this fight. It picks out the average, the lowest average item level that any raid group has killed this boss with. Because this is a heroic boss, and it's flexible, it also says for the exact raid size what the lowest recorded one is as well. That's of minimal interest. What's of real interest is everything below it. So potion use. For example, let's say you're on a boss and you've struggled to beat an enraged timer, say. You would expect your DPS players to have used 2 pots. One just before the pull and then one sometime during the fight. So this will tell you how many people used 2 and how many people used 1 and then how many people used 0, for example. Be aware that obviously if there was a ninja pull, then some people may not have been able to use 2 because either they'd have used their pre-pot potion as the boss was pulled, so it doesn't go on cooldown, or they wouldn't have got their pre-pot off at all. Health stone and healing tonic use. This is useful if someone died slowly because just below that, indeed, we have the slow deaths. So let's say someone had died slowly. In other words, they had time to know about it. They weren't just one shot. They had time to do something about themselves. Yes, they might have expected healers to get them up, but ultimately they had some power to do this. Did they use a health stone? If the answer is no, then naughty. So slow deaths here, we can only see this one. Now this one actually isn't a play. This is me. This is my hunter. I had it in the raid or as a second character on my account. I was just dragging it through so that we had a 20% chance of an extra piece of loot for the raid, and so that I could just basically coin and hoover up any loot. So I wasn't actually playing it. It was on my, as I say, my other account stuffed in a corner. So obviously this died. But let's say this was an actual player and they died from whatever, and it's recorded as a slow death, which means, in other words, they had some seconds at least to know something about it. Then I would have expected here to see 1 by the healing tonic use. Then we come on to avoidable damage, or any source of damage that in theory is avoidable. Doesn't necessarily mean it's avoidable by the individual player. So if I click on 1, for example, here, because you can click on each individual one. Now you'll notice there's a note here as well. It tells you where this damage comes from. Very useful for people who are not completely familiar with the aim mechanics in the fight. So it says here, when echoing anguish is dispelled, players explode. Anyone within 10 yards of the dispelled player will take damage and gain torment. So obviously the cause of this could be someone not moving away. It could be someone just being dispelled too early before they've been able to move away. So it could actually be someone dispelling them when they shouldn't have done. But for whatever reason, it's a source of damage that, for the raid's purposes at least, is avoidable. And then you've got the different types of avoidable damage here. And again, there's a little note by each one telling you what the nature of this damage is. Then on this particular fight, of course, you've got torment stacks up from Fell Squall and Bonesaw particularly. So it'll tell you how many ticks of each of these things people took. So if, for example, you've been telling your raid to minimize the amount of ticks they're taking, you can sort of see who's doing well at that and who's not doing so well. So this is a pretty good page to go to if, say, you're wiping, you're not quite sure why. Have a look at this. Now, I will just point one thing out here. You will notice that this Problems tab, it's not on all, there we go. So this feature is not supported for this boss and difficulty. So for some bosses and some difficulties, especially towards the start of a tier, you'll find that it's not actually there, and it's of course more common for mythic bosses as well. This is because the author has to actually physically input this data. It takes a lot of time to do that, and there's more information on the author of this at the end of the video if you want to support them. Also, they've been on holiday recently, so it might well be that for people ahead of the curve, this feature is not necessarily all that useful because they're likely to go faster than the author. This is more for the majority of people sort of chasing that curve. But yeah, if you find that it says this feature is not supported for this boss and difficulty, it's not that it's not going to be, it's just that it's not yet. Okay, so let's have a look at 2 more things. On the summary page here in Analyze, So we can look at damage by source, healing. So it's just, as it suggests, a summary of things that have been done. Now there's two tabs along here that I haven't really covered that I do want to. One is threat. So this is just, obviously threat is generally a non-issue these days, but occasionally you might get someone who gets aggro on things. So I'm going to click on here. Our tanks are obviously very good, so we're not going to get aggro on things we shouldn't. But Demonic Inquisition has ads. So there's bound to be the odd thing here. So let's say someone was claiming that they were getting melee aggro or something like that, and someone else would say, no, you didn't. You can easily see if anyone basically had aggro on anything here. I mean, this fight is inevitable. So it'll tell you who got aggro, what they got aggro on, in this case, Tormented Soul. And when they were tanking, you can see the actual time, as well as for how long, roughly how long. The next tab, Interrupts. Now, this should be fairly straightforward. It tells you the name of the spell that was interrupted. There's only one on this boss. Who interrupted and how often. Now, let's say you've got a situation where someone's just showing in SCADA or something number of interrupts and someone's not on it and they're going, but I am interrupting. Of course, something like that, a damage meter is only going to show interrupts that were successful. So if you're interrupting a nanosecond after someone else, or more realistically, a few dozen milliseconds, then, okay, you're attempting to interrupt, but someone else has got there first. So let's say that someone was claiming that they were actually interrupting, it's just not showing up. Then you could actually have a look. So for mine, for example, it's Rebuke is the name of my interrupt. You need to know the name of the interrupt for a particular character. So what you could do here is you would click on the actual person. So I'll click on me. And then click on Casts. And then click on All Abilities. Now, the ability for me, as I say, is Rebuke. So I would click on that. And it will show you how many times I hit that. So you can see I hit Rebuke 7 times. If I go back to Interrupts, 3. So I've got 3 successful interrupts. So there was clearly a further 4 interrupts where I attempted to interrupt. Someone else just got there first. Now, finally, onto the author themselves. Kira is the one who creates Warcraft Logs. They do it for several games as well. World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy and WildStar. They pretty much do this single-handedly. If you want to support them in their work, obviously they need to be funded to be able to do this. It's a service that is incredibly useful to a lot of people, and it's not put as behind a paywall as such. You can get access to all of these features without having to pay anything. But if you did want to help support them, then they have a Patreon account, which you can find on patreon.com/warcraftlogs, and you can see the various rewards you get for the different levels of patronage there. If you want to follow them on Twitter, you can find them on twitter.com/Kira of Temerity as well. This is where they'll generally post any sort of updates that, for example, tell you about anything that's going on with Warcraft Logs. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that series on using Warcraft Logs. If you've got any questions, throw them down below as usual. Next week, we'll be starting off with another new series. So if you found this useful, don't forget to subscribe for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.